Good evening to you. I'm Natasha Zuves, and tonight we are standing at the crossroads of history, the border, a moral quandary wrapped in statistics, headlines, and human lives. And we are on the precipice of sweeping change. The American people have spoken decisively. The southern border, one of the major issues that catapulted President Trump back to the White House.
Entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came.
And tonight, mass deportations with hundreds of undocumented migrants already flown out of the U.S. Those military planes coming from the Department of Defense, part of a surge in assets from the Pentagon to the border. That includes 1,500 new troops heading south. We want to give you a live look at Fort Bliss, Texas tonight, where a second batch of troops arrived just today for southern border operations. The president fueling these efforts with executive orders declaring a national state of emergency at the border, attempting to end birthright citizenship, designating cartels as foreign terrorists, and stopping catch and release. And we have all seen the images, a mass of humanity who have left their home countries, choosing to cross the deadliest land migration route in the world for a chance of something better. Just one of them, Javier, who I spoke with outside of a Chicago police station where he slept on the sidewalk with his family after being bused from the border. He says he repeated to his 3-year-old daughter as they waded across the Rio Grande that God would take care of them. He says many died. He saw many killed by the cartels, and everyone in this scenario victimized by the cartels. As an undercover cartel hunter told me, working as a confidential informant for federal agencies, the cartels are making money hand over fist, not only charging the migrants thousands of dollars to cross, but getting rich as they flood the country with fentanyl. Over the last 4 years, he says he's only watched the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels grow stronger, their power expanding even within our own borders. Well, tonight we are uncovering new threats from the cartels along the southern border. We'll bring you those in just a moment. But we see Mexico tonight already preparing for an influx of deportees and of those unable to make it into the U.S., constructing these giant tent shelters to house thousands. And take a look. Across our country, ICE raids. We are tracking at least 2,400 arrests by agents already. President Trump's pace for ICE detainments increasing. The nation is holding its breath, both citizens and the families, the workers, dreamers, the undocumented. A nation once again confronted by a question that is as old as the American story itself. Who belongs here? And what are we prepared to do to enforce it? Tonight, NewsNation is shining a spotlight. We are bringing you there and bringing you deep reporting on this topic from all angles. Let's get to NewsNation border correspondent Allie Bradley first, on the ground live from the southern border in the Del Rio, Texas sector. Allie, new information just into our newsroom a short time ago, a second batch of troops arriving at Fort Bliss in Texas for a, quote, border mission. What details can you tell us about this right now?
Yeah, hi, good evening, Natasha. So we know that President Trump ordered at least 1,500 active duty troops down to the southern border. Now, we need to let Americans understand, our viewers understand, that this is not the first time troops have been at the border. In fact, they've been at the border since 2018, when President Trump actually declared a state of emergency then and deployed about 4,000 troops under Operation Guardian Support. So this is an ongoing effort. Now, it's worth noting that the Biden administration decreased that. They did keep DOD, Department of Defense soldiers down here, though, to the tune of about 2,500. So these troops are going to be supplementing the men and women that are already down here, that have already been on a border security mission. And it's really important to kind of distinguish what they're able to do. So the capacity that these troops are going to be down here in, they don't have immigration authority. They're not going to be apprehending migrants. They're there as a deterrent. They're there in their camouflage. They're going to have pepper ball launchers, most likely, and things like that. But again, acting as a deterrent. And they're also going to be used, according to Representative Tony Gonzalez, in more of a kind of ministerial role, so that the, quote, boots and badges can kind of be freed up to do these kind of enforcement operations, Natasha. So that's what we expect to see when it comes to these troops being deployed down here. Now, we don't know what the final total number is going to be or how many actually touched down today, but we do anticipate those numbers to continue and those kind of flights of those military troops down to the southern border to continue. Now, we did get new information on crossings, on the numbers that we've been seeing, Natasha. And my gosh, I actually had to ask my sources if I was seeing incorrect numbers because they are so staggering based on what we've been experiencing over the last 4 years. So earlier this week, we saw about 815 crossing a single day. Guess what yesterday was? 665 Border Patrol encounters across 9 sectors. That's thousands of miles in a 24-hour period. That is a drop in the bucket compared to what we saw under the Biden administration at its peak. 12,000 people in a day. Now, you'll remember under former President Obama, his DHS Secretary Jay Johnson said 1,000 people at the border is a crisis. So now we're seeing 665. We're hovering well under 1,000 since President Trump stepped back into office, Natasha. So we are seeing those efforts already. Kind of what my sources are telling me is, welcome to the Trump effect, Natasha. He said he was going to end illegal entries. We're seeing hardly anyone cross at the ports, and we're seeing very minimal numbers when it comes to illegal entries with Border Patrol.
Yeah, the decrease in those numbers, absolutely staggering. And meanwhile, Ali, I know that military flights are deporting undocumented migrants. Where are these flights leaving from? Where are they going? How many are returning home at this time?
Yeah, so it was really interesting because Representative Tony Gonzalez is down in El Paso today, and he was talking about El Paso is going to be ground zero for these deportation flights. We know that flights went out of Fort Bliss. We also know they went out of Tucson, Arizona. Now, we know here at NewsNation of as many as 3 flights that went out to Guatemala. So we looked at nearly 270 deportees that Guatemala accepted back yesterday. So that's what we're looking at with that. And when you have to consider these deportation flights, I need to be clear here. Deportation flights have been going on under Biden as well. This is not just a Trump effort, you guys. Deportations have happened. The Northern Triangle countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, they've always played well with the United States, so they have taken back these deportation flights. The ones we have to worry about and the ones that are going to be problematic, China, Venezuela, Middle Eastern countries, things like that don't have good diplomatic relations. Venezuela has not taken a flight back from the United States since February of last year. So they're talking about ways to kind of work with Mexico. Mexico has a better working relationship with Venezuela. So will Sheinbaum take back those people and work with Maduro? We don't know yet. They are taking some people back. They're obviously taking Mexican nationals, but they are taking some people not from Mexico to help repatriate them as well, Natasha. But those are some issues we're going to deal with. But it is worth noting deportation flights did not just start under Trump. They are an ongoing effort under DHS. Natasha.
Yeah, Ali, has there been any resistance from any countries that you've been monitoring who do not want to take these flights back of these individuals being deported?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, you've got Venezuela that has not accepted a flight back since February. Now, when I talked with Vice President J.D. Vance about this down here at the border, so what are you going to do? I mean, they haven't accepted flights back, right? We have no vetting information. We have no criminal history from these countries. They're not playing in our sandbox, for lack of a better phrase there. And so when it comes to it, J.D. Vance says, they're going to take them back. And even President Trump said, we're confident they're going to take them back because they're going to use tariffs. They're going to use economic sanctions and things like that. J.D. Vance literally said they're going to attack the economies of these countries that will not allow the United States to enforce the law. So that's what we can expect there. Of course, you know, President Trump is working on those diplomatic relations with China as well. So we can expect to see more of those flights return to that country as well, Natasha.
And Ali, I want to talk about the raids because, of course, we've been monitoring the ICE raids sweeping the country. We see Border Czar Tom Homan, who you've spoken with before as well, telling NewsNation that these were underway. Give us details on the latest raids. What are you monitoring here?
Yeah, so again, you know I'm going to be honest about everything and call a spade a spade. These ICE raids, if you want to call them that, they have been going on for a long time, too. They're done by a fugitive operations task force, if you will. It's actually a detail that ICE officers sign up for. It's a 2-year detail, and they actually do this task force, and they have targeted criminals that they go after each and every day. I've looked at the charts. It's like a roller coaster. Earlier on in January, they arrested around 400 criminal illegal immigrants. So again, this is an ongoing effort. Now, we are seeing the numbers increase a little bit. You're looking at the screen right now of how many criminal illegal immigrants they've actually already arrested. 10 Tren de Aragua members. That's coming from that very violent Venezuelan gang that President Trump has vowed to target under Operation Aurora. We've seen them tied to several heinous crimes in the United States, including the murder of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungary in Houston and also 22-year-old Georgia nursing student Laken Riley. Both of their deaths had ties to Tren de Aragua as well. So President Trump zeroing in on that gang, that violent gang. But again, Natasha, the kind of nuance there is they're Venezuelan. So how do you get them out? How do you remove them? And what else is interesting here, I'm looking at the numbers from yesterday. We didn't see hardly any Venezuelans cross the southern border. So that messaging must be getting back to that country as well, Natasha.
Going to be speaking with Jocelyn's mother live here on Prime in just a moment. I do want to ask you, you monitor the border every single day. What is the border like on the ground this evening? What are you seeing? Is it a stark difference from where you're standing?
If I can try to paint a picture for you here, the biggest difference is the energy, right? So it's the energy and the morale from the agents and the men and women boots on the ground down here. But you can hear a pin drop out here, Natasha. It is so desolate. When you talk about 665 people crossing the border illegally, that's, again, thousands of miles, 24-hour period across 9 sectors. Where are they? They're not here. They're not crossing the border and walking up and self-surrendering to Border Patrol agents at the level that we were seeing. And I want to show you right here. Daniel, can you show kind of this wall situation? So this is one of the biggest issues that the southern border. This is politics in a picture, you guys. So you have the wall here that was ended. The Trump administration, Biden ended the construction of that wall. So you can see that black iron fence that was actually constructed under the Bush administration. And then you can see the chicken wire. That is what was put up as kind of the fail-safe to bridge that gap, if you will. So some major issues there. The sheriff here, Natasha, he's actually a Democrat, believe it or not. There's only 2 Republican sheriffs along the southern border here in Texas. And the sheriff here says, just fix my fence. It's good for the community. It's good for the nation. This isn't about politics. This is about my community. So that is what's happening down here on the ground. But the reality is, agents are able to go do their job again. There won't be a story at the border anymore unless there's a terrorist apprehended or a huge surge, Natasha, because agents doing their job is not a news story. The fact that they were not able to do their job is why we've been down here.
Allie Bradley, live from Del Rio, Texas. Appreciate all of your coverage and joining us tonight. We'll see you later tonight. Thank you. All right, one of the biggest stories NewsNation has been following in relation to the border, Allie Bradley just mentioned, the death of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungary in Houston. She was killed last June after prosecutors say she was kidnapped by 2 Venezuelan men who illegally crossed the border earlier that year. Now, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. And joining us now tonight is Alexis Nungary, Jocelyn's mother, who has been steadfast in trying to find justice for her daughter. I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. Thank you so much for joining us. And first, can I ask, how are you doing?
Hi, good evening. I'm doing better. You know, the grief never really goes away. The pain never really goes away. It just becomes more tolerable, and you just learn to deal with it, essentially. I try my hardest to always bring light to her name and her story, and I always do every interview that's asked of me because I'm continuously spreading awareness, and I'm continuously trying to make a name and a purpose from her not being here anymore. And I want to help other families and other young women and children who shouldn't have to go through what Jocelyn went through, what my family is now dealing with, the loss of Jocelyn.
Yeah, I see you creating meaning from this in a powerful way. And I know that prosecutors say they will be seeking the death penalty in this case. Is that the justice you're looking for?
Essentially, what I want is truly not a Christian faith-based way to go. I wish they could have the I wish that the same things that could happen. I'm so sorry, my son. I wish that they wouldn't have to be living and breathing and doing the same things and having to still live and breathe another day while Jocelyn is not here and not living and breathing anymore. But that's just not the reality of things. That's just not the reality of what can happen. And honestly, it's an eye for an eye. And as much as I wish that they didn't have another breath in their life to still live and breathe another day, I think that the death penalty fits the crime. If they didn't want to have the death penalty in play for their consequence, they should have never did the actions that they did against her.
Alexis, what is the hardest part of all of this? What do people not understand about the situation that you're in?
People think that I am against all immigration. People think that I am targeting Mexicans and people who are coming here and wanting a better life. And I will forever always speak on, I am pro-immigration. I am pro people wanting to live a better life and wanting their kids to have a better life overall. But there's a reason that every country has policies in place for border protection, for border security. And when we don't have a secure border and we're just allowing all these individuals coming in, especially from countries that are not vetted, we have absolutely no idea who we're letting into this country. And it's a lot more dangerous to allow that to happen because they're amongst young women, they're amongst young children who are vulnerable, who don't know the dangerous, heinous people that come in this country and what they're capable of. I support coming here the right way, and I support people wanting a better life. We as a country need migration, but I just don't support people who come here the wrong way.
I understand that, and I want to try to make time for two questions, but if we can be brief here, because I know we're almost out of time.
Right.
Congress has passed the Lake and Riley Act. Trump's set to make it the first bill he signs, and that would require a detention for undocumented migrants accused of theft and violent crimes. Does it go far enough?
I definitely believe it could go further. Me and Senator Ted Cruz are also working on an act to hopefully get passed through all the way to Congress, to the House, to the Senate, to have every detention center bed applicable and used, and use every measures to. I think the act that was passed for Lake and Riley is justice for what's happened to her, and that's my power to even make more justice and to even give more security to make sure that we are all safe as
I hear that. Alexis, very quickly, I know the suspects are due back in court next month. I can't imagine what it is like to see them face to face. Do you plan on saying anything to them?
No, I do not.
Alexis Nungary, I appreciate you making the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Still to come, an urgent warning from Mexican officials about explosive materials being planted by cartels, where they're being found, and how it could potentially impact you. Plus, the cartels making money hand over fist, not only charging migrants thousands to cross the border, but getting rich as they flood the country with fentanyl. With the help of a cartel hunter, we're investigating how the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels are increasing their influence in the world of organized crime. Be sure to stay tuned, because we're going to be speaking to a man who knows the cartels like the back of his hand, a former cartel kingpin. You don't want to miss his insights on the other side of the break. Want to bring you a live look at the Biggs Army Airfield at Fort Bliss, Texas tonight. This afternoon, we know a second batch of troops arrived to support border missions across the southern border. Army officials not specifying at this time how many troops arrived today. We do know earlier this week, President Trump deployed 1,500 troops to support ongoing border missions, joining the 2,500 National Guard members along the border, 4,000 troops and counting. Well, just yesterday, 80 Guatemalan migrants were deported from Biggs Army Airfield at Fort Bliss. Congressman Tony Gonzalez has called the region, quote, ground zero for the border crisis and ground zero for deportation operations. And a live look at Juarez, Mexico right now. Cars are waiting to cross into the border. Lines backed up tonight. Today, Mexican authorities receiving a new explosive threat from the cartels. While earlier this week, President Trump said that America's most elite fighting forces could be used to topple them.
President Trump, if cartels are now going to be seen as foreign terror organizations, would you think about ordering U.S. Special Forces into Mexico to take them out?
could happen. Stranger things have happened.
President Donald Trump officially designating cartels as foreign terror organizations. Trump saying cartels, quote, threaten the safety of the American people, the security of the United States, and the stability of the international order in the Western Hemisphere. We're heading back to the southern border now, where NewsNation's Jorge Ventura is standing by for us. And Jorge, we are hearing of a new threat by Mexican cartels tonight. What are you monitoring?
Yeah, that's right, Natasha. This is extremely alarming. Mexican authorities are now putting out a new warning of cartels planning explosives on roads, highways, and neighborhoods in Tamaulipas, Mexico. That sits right across the Rio Grande Valley. Every single day, thousands of Texans cross over to the border to visit Tamaulipas. You're looking at these three images now of three different types of explosives. Mexican officials are urging Mexican citizens to not touch these explosives and to avoid them. And Natasha, I just got off the phone with a contact in Tamaulipas, Mexico, who tells me that those explosives are likely tied to two different criminal groups. The first, the Gulf Cartel that controls Tamaulipas, and the second, the new cartel, Jalisco New Generation Cartel. They're both battling for control in that Tamaulipas area. The contact also informs me that these explosives are often actually tied to drones and target Mexican authorities and other criminal groups. This warning is coming from the Mexican side of the border, but we are also urging Americans who are traveling to Mexico to keep an eye out for these type of explosives. Once again, you're taking a look at them right there on your screen. Three different types from Tamaulipas, Mexico. It's extremely alarming, especially for American citizens traveling to Mexico. And this new cartel warning also coming as NewsNation has confirmed that cartel members shot an American hiker in Jacuba, California. That's right outside of San Diego, right on the border. You're actually looking at video of the American hiker actually being airlifted by Border Patrol agents, by BORTAC. It's a special unit with Border Patrol agents. According to the hikers, they say they didn't realize they were being held up by the cartel members because they didn't speak Spanish. And now you're seeing that video of that hiker being rescued. The cartel members did flee back to Mexico. This incident does come as President Trump has now designated Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And Natasha, last year I was actually reporting on that Mexican side where those cartel members came from. I was actually embedded with Mexican immigration officials on a story that we were working on for NewsNation. That area is extremely dangerous. It's controlled by armed cartel members. We actually couldn't even go embedded with Mexican immigration unless the Mexican army was alongside us. So once again, it's an extremely dangerous area right there in Jacuma. That other side is Tecate, Mexico. Natasha.
All right, Jorge Ventura live in Eagle Pass, Texas with that look tonight. Thank you. And now to a NewsNation exclusive. A man deep undercover sitting down with NewsNation, working as a confidential informant with federal agencies to rescue women and children being sex trafficked by Mexican cartels. And he's revealing how the cartels enslave women and children as young as 8 years old in their brothels, and how he's hunting them, taking down the traffickers. He tells me he has freed 200 women and children so far. At great risk, a man going by Sebastian sits down with NewsNation. He wants to do this interview to send two messages. One, to the cartels and sex traffickers, he's hunting them. Two, to the women and children they've enslaved and sex trafficked, he's coming. Keep fighting. He says he's helped free more than 200 so far. How young are some of these victims who are being trafficked?
Yeah, you're 12, 16, 14 when they get kidnapped or they're forced into it, but eventually they age and then they always find replacement.
He says it often starts with a family south of the border trying to cross into the U.S. illegally, paying the cartels. These days, he says often $15,000 a person. The cartel looks at these individuals and is selecting for what?
If the young lady is pretty, woman or child is attractive, and they feel that they could sell that child or traffic that person or that child in one of their brothels, strip clubs, massage parlors, they'll just outright kidnap that person. And if they are with family members, they will either try to strategically say, well, she's going to go in a separate car, and then when they keep the girl, they'll just tell the family member, you know what, the cops pulled us over, they took her away, immigration has her, and then that's it, they never hear from her. They have to service, men, depending on the day of the week, as little as 5, 10 in one day to as many as 30, 40 in one night. None of the girls make any money. Some of them get promised that if they worked off up to a certain amount, they'll eventually be released. Usually $50,000 or $100,000 that they have to make. But that goal line always gets moved. Do a lot of women die in the course of all of this? A lot of women die, a lot of women are murdered. For instance, Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, the ladies they felt that they had served their purpose, and they just took them out to the outskirts of the city and murdered all of them. They knew the faces and names of the Johns, which were politicians, police officers, business owners, and obviously the names and faces of their traffickers.
Sebastian knows he's fighting against time. As a confidential informant for federal agencies, he says he is not paid. It does afford him certain protection in the work that he does, and a network of intel and support that has been life-saving. For example, one agency warning him they'd learned he'd been compromised and not to go. As the director of rescue operations at New Hope Foundation International, his work is mostly funded by donations to the nonprofit. These are the methods he can disclose.
Once they trust you, they start offering you girls.
He befriends the traffickers and poses as a John. The challenge is reaching these women and never touching them without raising suspicion. One playbook he can disclose, gifting the women or children a cell phone.
That they say, oh, I like your phone. Oh, yeah, it's cool. You know, I'm going to get another one. Would you like to keep this one after I get the new one? And they say, yeah, it's a $400, $600 phone, and they'll get it for free. Little do they know that coordinated efforts with the government, that phone has tools in there to monitor everything.
That cell phone is often what cracks the case wide open, giving the government what it needs to bust the sex ring. NewsNation spoke with former federal agent and director of the Human Trafficking Response Unit at the Office of the Oklahoma Attorney General, Kevin Metcalf.
He has, however, the trust, the resources, and the network to do things we can't. So when we tell him for example, there's a 13-year-old girl and we don't know if we can keep her safe, he can reach out and make sure that happens. So even for government officials, we struggle to do things like that.
Leon Worthen is former director of operations at Naval Special Warfare. He says he's worked 12 cases with Sebastian, using him in reconnaissance.
He is definitely the real deal. He has the ability and the fearlessness and the courage and the bravery to put himself in harm's way when it comes to rescuing a victim of trafficking or abuse. And every single time, the results are amazing.
What keeps him going is one child in particular, the little boy he was decades ago when no one came to save him.
When I was a child, I was sexually assaulted multiple times on 2 different occasions. And at that time, nothing was done to help me. It's hard to speak out. So I know that those kids find it hard to speak out once they fall in that trap.
And although Sebastian more commonly sees survivors trafficked starting at 12 years old, he says his group has helped parents who've had their little girls taken by the cartel as young as 8 or 9 years old for the purposes of sex trafficking. Joining us live tonight is a man who knows the cartel like the back of his hand, former Sinaloa cartel kingpin, Margarito J. Flores Jr. Thank you so much for joining us. I understand why you are wearing glasses and a mask. It is incredibly brave to speak to us tonight. I do want to start with the report we just saw about Sebastian. Put into perspective for us how life-threatening this work is, how important it is.
Oh, I mean, the fact that he even came on your show says a lot. It's scary because he's actually still in the field, still working undercover and putting his life at risk to save, women who are being and young children who are being trafficked by these drug cartels and other criminal organizations. So it's dangerous. I actually myself worked undercover, and it's probably the most scariest thing to do, and it shows a lot about his bravery and why he does it. So thanks to Sebastian.
If you could send a message to President Trump tonight, what is one thing you would want him to know about the cartels? One thing that you feel is not being taken into account enough?
You know what? I share this in all of my seminars that I actually do, that it's going to take a multi-phase approach. It's not just about labeling these cartels as terrorist organizations. I think that's a great tool. But I think what no one ever looks at or fails to realize is that the drug trafficking is a business. So the war on drugs, it's okay to look at it as a military type group or to take military type actions against it, but it's a business, and I think that it's going to take a little bit more, and it's going to take a collaborative effort, not just in the border and in Mexico, but also in the United States. with my background, I was born and raised in Chicago. I always say that I was American made before I even stepped foot or came to meet any of the drug lords of the Sinaloa cartel. I was already um, a very successful kingpin in the United States, in a city like Chicago. And I think that what we fail to realize is that there's a lot more American drug distributors in the United States and in Mexico. I think that drug distribution in the United States and Canada and all around the world, you know, scores any drug cartel in Mexico by far.
Yeah,
So I think that
I think to your point, and I don't mean to interrupt here, but there's a notion that it is the cartel coming up from the southern border and infiltrating communities, and you say that is true, and also there are American-born operatives who are turning and working for the cartels. You were one of them, along with your brother in Chicago, I know. What is one thing you can tell us about working for El Chapo and El Mayo that would surprise us?
That regardless of what anyone thinks, that the Mexican drug cartels are fearful of the United States government. They are fearful of the prisons and the laws, and they should be fearful of military action or anything that Donald Trump puts into place to combat them. I think it's great that Donald Trump is actually taking, the president's taking a strong stance against Mexican drug cartels. And they are fearful because they know that the laws of the United States ain't the same as in Mexico, that they can't get away with the things that they get away with. And it kind of goes to show that, El Chapo's been, convicted and facing a life sentence, in a Florence prison, and now you have El Mayo in custody.
Yeah. Jay Flores, I wish we had more time. I appreciate speaking with you as always and how you have completely turned your life around, your mission today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Natasha.
Still to come as ICE closes in on migrants. Once vibrant neighborhoods are ghost towns tonight. And we are taking you to a neighborhood that has gone silent in 3.5 minutes. Stay close. Promises made, promises kept, with President Trump taking immediate action on his top campaign focus, fighting illegal immigration. From coast to coast, ICE agents going city to city, sometimes door to door, tracking down the nearly 1.5 million undocumented set for deportation. And as ICE closes in on migrants, once vibrant Chicago neighborhoods are now turning into ghost towns. And tonight we are taking you to a neighborhood that has gone silent.
Like I said from day one, no one's off the table.
The Trump administration setting out to execute what it has promised.
We arrested 1,300 people. Over 1,000 of them were criminals.
Immigration and customs enforcement operations reportedly underway in jurisdictions all across the nation. Federal agents have been spotted in many sanctuary cities carrying out these operations.
I hope the sanctuary cities come around.
The usually bustling and vibrant streets of this Hispanic neighborhood in Chicago sit relatively empty because of the concerns over ICE.
Welcome to Mesquite Restaurant, sir.
This little taqueria, like most in the Pilsen neighborhood, is owned and operated by immigrants. The Cruz family, who in 1994 made the long journey from Mexico City to Chicago to grow their little taco stand into a thriving restaurant.
We got tacos, we got breakfast, chilaquiles.
This American dream is one thousands of migrants are striving for when they cross the southern border. But the drastic shutdown of illegal immigration is a campaign promise the majority of American voters are expecting Donald Trump to make good on.
Honest to you, when he come back again, I was like, man, I feel scared.
President Trump, border czar Tom Homan, and the highest-ranking members of Immigration and Customs Enforcement say they're only targeting violent criminals during these initial deportations. NewsNation has seen what these operations look like. I rode along and conducted early morning raids with ICE agents when they arrested men from Iraq and Belize, convicted criminals who spent prison time for robbery and gun charges.
I'm not a criminal. I'm a good guy. I pay my taxes. I do everything right. You know what's going to happen to me? They're going to grab me too. You know? They're not going to check right now.
We've seen examples of resistance throughout Hispanic neighborhoods, including these signs instructing immigrant men and women to push back and block federal agents from entering their homes. But the reality is, new polling shows 65% of Americans strongly support deporting immigrants convicted of violent crimes. That includes Horacio Aguilera, an Iraq war veteran and Mexican-American police officer. He voted for Trump and wants mass deportations of criminals to carry on as quickly as possible.
A lot of Hispanic Americans, there was also a rise that voted for Trump. I think 9 out of 10 people that are living here in America, Chicago, Illinois, are going to agree that if you're an illegal resident and you are arrested for committing a crime, prosecuted for committing a crime, and you are an illegal resident, you are subject to deportation.
The so-called mass deportations have not been carried out in Chicago like people once believed. But that hasn't stopped local and state leaders from sounding the alarm and strengthening local codes which reinforce the city's sanctuary status.
We should stand up for them. That is the right thing to do. But he's trying to tear things down.
Governor, what's your response to people who might say that Democrats are the one sowing chaos, confusion, and fear-mongering when talking about mass deportations that haven't even happened in Chicago?
What are you talking about? They are literally threatening people all across the country. How can you say that we're overreacting somehow? We're not.
The Trump administration is vowing to investigate and prosecute local and state officials who stand in the way of what the federal government is doing. Natasha.
Yeah, Alex, with that tonight, thank you. And still to come, our Allie Bradley has been on the ground at the southern border since the early days of NewsNation, and she has spoken with 2 little girls traveling unaccompanied from Guatemala, and she has come face to face with criminals crossing the border as well, uncovering some of the cartel smugglings. She has emerged as a distinct voice in the media landscape, one committed to following the facts when it comes to immigration. On the other side of this break, she is sharing her insights, her analysis from years of her work at the southern border. Stay with us. NewsNation has been reporting on the border when no one else was there, and every step of the way, from going face to face with fugitives to riding along with sheriff's departments. NewsNation's border correspondent Allie Bradley has been living and breathing the border. Most recently, she has learned firsthand the changes coming from the Trump administration and border czar Tom Homan's plan to increase ICE operations and override local sanctuary city roadblocks. He says there will also be prosecutions for elected officials who impede law enforcement. Allie Bradley joins us live now to discuss some of the most impactful stories along our southern border over the past few years. And Allie, do I understand this correctly? You've been on the border for more than 2.5 years now.
Yeah, I actually live at the border, so this is my home too. It is not politics for anybody down here. This is our community. So what we've really endured over the last 3.5 years really has been a sight to behold. So let's walk through some of that. My second trip down here to the southern border was actually here in my backyard to Del Rio, where there were around 16,000 migrants from Haiti that amassed underneath the International Bridge, which kind of became ground zero for this crisis, which is in September of 2021. So that is when a lot of the eyes really came onto the border crisis and people really started paying attention. But a lot of people didn't really believe it, and I didn't understand it. So then I ended up walking with a caravan of 6,000 people for about 2 weeks. We started down in Tapachula, and we walked for several miles. Some of these people carrying signs that said Joe Biden is for all. They were telling me what they were doing was legally illegal because they weren't hurting anybody, that they were leaving nothing, trying for something, and worst case scenario, they go back to nothing. And that now is what a lot of these individuals will be facing. And then from there, we actually watched as cartel smugglers and individuals on the Mexican side were sending children over the wall. So this next area is Naco, Arizona, where we watched smugglers operate almost every day. One day I watched 15 guys in camo jump this wall in 15 minutes with no Border Patrol response. They pretty much have an assembly line there. And this is my phone through the Mexico side of the wall showing their operations. They come out of the bushes with a rope already around them, climb up that wall, clear the wall, get their phone from the cartel member, and then it's off to the races. They're trying to evade, which we know there were also hundreds of thousands of known gotaways over the last 4 years as well that were issues. Now, one of the worst days that I experienced at the border was this one. This was in November of 2023, and there were 300 people on the other side of that Rio Grande River there. The fog was so thick, they wanted to cross anyways, forming human chains. This individual was actually lifeless. We watched 2 lifeless bodies pulled out of that Rio Grande. Children were being swept away. Mothers were screaming for their babies. This was one of the hardest situations I have ever seen. Thank God those two individuals were revived right in front of us. So it could have been a much more tragic situation there. But then we ended up in Lukeville. So Lukeville, Arizona was one of those situations that became an epicenter for special interest migrants, namely migrants from African nations. This was one of those holes in the wall that the cartel cut, sending a Peruvian family through. One of those guys only had one leg. So this is what they were doing. They're capitalizing off of people's vulnerabilities, and they were making $13 billion a year doing it through our southern border. This is me and a cartel friend. They're dealing with things. But Tony Gonzalez says, Natasha, we expect these deportation numbers to go from the hundreds to the thousands. Promises made, promises kept, Natasha.
And I know, Allie, it is incredible to see all of that reporting all in one place. And I appreciate so much that you bring us all sides, the people who are desperate to get in with their families, exploited by the cartels. You've brought us the Border Patrol agents themselves who have said for so long we don't have what we need. And of course, the Americans who live along the border as well, who are overwhelmed. Allie Bradley, cannot thank you enough, live in Del Rio, Texas, for us tonight. Thank you so much. And our coverage of the border crisis continues after the break. Stay with us. We've all seen the images, a mass of humanity who have left their home countries. For so many, America means hope, a chance for something better for their children. But we must also acknowledge the other side, Americans who have made their voices heard, the anxious, the angry, the rightly worried, who have watched these same images and feel our borders, once a line in the sand, became a gate swung wide open. The concern of many that the system is buckling and we simply cannot accept everyone who wants to come in. Enter President Donald Trump, a man who's never been afraid of shaking the establishment. His message sharp, his promise blunt, massive change. He speaks of mass deportations like a man setting the stage for historic measures. Laws enforced, gates closed, chaos ended. Well, the nation is holding its breath, both citizens and the families, the workers, the dreamers, the undocumented. A nation once again confronted by a question as old as the American story itself. Who belongs here, and what are we prepared to do to enforce it? We will stay on this topic. We thank you for your time tonight. I'm Natasha Zuves. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.